Welcome back to our video on how to make an Instagram clone. In this video we will be looking at improving the very basic MVP that we built in the first video. And I'm going to jump right in here, and one of the first things we're going to do is create thumbnails for our image uploader. And we are also going to enable the whitelist of the image types. So these are set by default in the uploader file that is created. So let's go ahead and restart the server and test this out. So we'll go and edit our profile. And we can see here that there is an error, resize to fit is undefined method. So one thing we forgot to do here was enable the mini magic. So we are using mini magic to handle the resizing of the images as we upload them. And we have a gem already in place for this. So if we go ahead and restart the server, we can try this again once more. So this appears to be working correctly. So now we can go back into our feed view and we can add a thumbnail of the user profile at the top above the image. So that's within the post meta div that we have set. And we can even make this conditional if we want to, but if we reload now we can see that our thumbnail is in place, although it is looking rather square, so maybe we will improve that a little bit. So as we can see before, we have this profile pic class. So we want to reuse this, so we can rename that to a different class name and paste that in. And we'll also need to replace that on the profile page. So now this is looking much better. We can also go ahead and add some padding or margin to that to space it out a little bit. So overall I'm quite happy with this. It's starting to look a little bit better. So one other thing we can do here is add a link to the username so that we can click on it and go to the user's profile. And this appears to be working now. However, we can change the styling to make this text a little bit darker. And there is a class preset in Bootstrap called text dark that we can use for that. It's a quick way to style that. So that's looking pretty good overall. We can also just add a link to the thumbnail itself just to polish this off, round it off before we move on to the next section. Let's copy and paste that link in. And that's it completed. It's looking pretty good. So now we want to go ahead and add the post details underneath the image. So that will have things like the description, when it was posted, how many days ago, and even we'll have sections in there for the ability to like and comment on the post. So the first thing we'll do is add in the post description. So we need to create a new migration to add the description to the posts model. So currently there is no column in the database for that under the post table. So we will add a new one. And this will act as a text area. So we will set that to type of text and run the migration. And we will need to add that to the view then. So we'll add the description to the post view. So we want to add the field here so that users can populate that at the same time when they are uploading their photo. And we should probably add a label here just so that the user knows what this field is for. Okay, it's looking a little bit better. And we can go ahead and do the same for the image. And you'll notice here that the spacing is quite tight, so I want to space that out a little bit. And we can do that by adding a div around the fields using the form grip class that is part of Bootstrap. And that just adds a little bit of space around the fields. And it's looking a little bit better. So we can try this out again just to see if it's working now with the description. I'm going to test this with multi-lines just to see how it looks. And it has saved the post and inserted it into the database, but it is missing the field for description. So we need to add that to our whitelist within the controller. And hopefully this will work this time. So we'll just paste this in and try it once again. And we can see here at the bottom our new post has been added with the text description. So one thing we want to do here is style this text underneath the image and have a background with a border, just to make it a little bit more professional looking. So we can add some styles within the post style sheet. So let's go ahead and set a background color and a little padding around the outside to give some space. And we can probably pad that a little bit more. So now we will add in the total post likes for each post. And this hasn't been set yet, but we will add this as a temporary value just to get the layout looking better. So within the post model, I'm going to set a method for this to return a 0 value. So one other thing, I'm going to add a light gray border around this post details section. And it's starting to look a little bit better. So on Instagram there is this date field of how long ago the post was made. So we want to do something similar to that. And there's also a username for who created the post. So we will add those fields now to our view. And once again, let's link our username back to the profile. So we can copy and paste that link. So now we have added our username in a bold font. And then underneath we will add the time ago that the post was created. And let's add a style to this paragraph to use a lighter color of text using the text muted class. And now we can see our time since the post was created in action here. So it's looking pretty good right now. One thing we do want to do is move the posts that are newest up to the top of the feed. So that's how Instagram does it, and that's kind of how we want to approach it as well. So when you go to the feed, you'll always see the newest posts at the top. And we can achieve that by setting a default scope within the model. So that's within the post model. And now you can see that our top post is indeed our latest post. So that's looking good. If we had different types of posts on the profile, then you would see that it is actually the latest one in first place here. But in the example, I've just uploaded multiple of the same kind of posts. So maybe we'll add some new ones later to see how that works with different designs. So now we will try to improve the design of the summary section that is on the dashboard or on the feed. So the top right section of the feed will show us the logged in user. So that will be our username. And what we want to do here is add a profile image and just improve the design a little bit so that it's looking more natural and more user-friendly. So this is what happens when you copy and paste code. So what we're doing here is we copied it out of the post loop. So we need to change that to use the current account. So that's a signed in account, and that should work again for setting the path for the image. So once it's clicked on. So we forgot to set it here, but we'll tweak that now really quickly. So now we can see that our new profile image and username is at the top right. And underneath them we have a suggestions box for other users to follow. So we can try to populate this and make it look a little better. At least we can put the title in for now, just so that it has some purpose. And we can include a see all link. And we will float that to the right, and that will be a link, but for now we can just leave it as a text. So we can actually set a blank link in here for now. So that's starting to look quite reasonable now and quite close to what's on Instagram. It can be tidied up further, but it's a good start for now. So we can go ahead and darken the text on that and make the font bolded for the suggestions. But I actually think it looks better if it's not bolded. Possibly it's just the typeface that we're using, so we can remove that. And again, we can probably improve the padding a little bit here. So this is something that you can play around with until you're happy with how it looks. But all in all, it looks fairly decent right now, so we can move on with some of the other sections. So the next thing I want to look at is this like button and the comment button underneath each post. So to start into this, we need to create a new migration for the likes. So we'll create a new model for this and a new table in the database. And that table will then be linked to both the accounts and the posts table. And we can do that using the references command. And we can set that to account and then to post. So that will have a foreign key for each of these models, each of these database tables. And then we'll have a timestamps, and that is the created at and updated at fields for the likes. So we can then know that when a like has been created for that post. So maybe we won't show it visually on the views, but it means in future that we could easily do something like notifications to show when a like comes through. So now we are going to add the relationship between the models. So in the case of post, it has many likes, as many users can like the post. And now we will create a model for the like itself. And that like will then belong to a post. And also then the like belongs to the account also. So each account that likes a post will have that relationship. And the account can have many likes and many posts. So now let's create our controller for likes. We'll just copy and paste some of this code here and just replace it from our post model. Now you can do a find and replace all here, but there's not so much code, so I'm just going to quickly update it. I'm going to remove most of the methods. We will just keep the save like method, and this will be a new like. And the two values that we need to capture here are post ID and account ID. So account ID is going to be the logged in user, which is the current account, and we will just need to catch the post ID from the posted form data. So we can get that from the params, and then we're going to try and save this like, and based on if we save it, then we will return a message. So this code will be triggered via JavaScript using an Ajax request. And the reason for that is we do not want to have to redirect the user to a new page. So we want them to click on the icon and it sends a message in the background to store that like. So that will be handled using Ajax. So after this code is executed, we can render a partial, which will have some JavaScript code in it to handle the updating of the display within the view. So if it is successful, then we want to highlight the like button, make it red, or highlight it and make it active looking in some way. And if it doesn't, then we don't want to do that. We don't want to do anything. So we will use JavaScript rendering to do that. So now we want to add a new route that will be used for when a like is generated via our Ajax request. So we'll point that to our likes controller and the save like method, and then we can name a path for this. So like post. So we have left this as a get request, but in a production environment, it's much better to be changing this to a post request. And the reason for that is that sometimes we have bots or crawlers that crawl websites, and you don't want them automatically crawling over the like posts method. So this would cause some chaos in a production environment possibly, but for the scope of this video it's fine. So now we want to add these icons underneath our post, just like they are on Instagram, and we can do that using Font Awesome. So that is a typeface that is designed for icons. So we will set that up within our application. So now we will create a div to hold our like and comment buttons. So I'm just adding some Font Awesome classes here just to get this set up initially. We will change these afterwards. And we'll change this to comment post or comment post, post comment even. So let's go ahead and download the Font Awesome. So now we want to go ahead and drop in a new fonts directory within the assets folder. So that's under app assets fonts. And then under our vendor, we will drop in some style sheets and the minified Font Awesome JavaScript file. And then within the application.css, we will put in our minified version of the Font Awesome style sheet. And then we'll do the same again for the application.js file, so fontawesome.min. And if we restart the server, then we should be able to use these classes within our application. So one thing we need to do quickly in here that we missed is we need to change the URL within the fontawesome.css file. So we want to use our asset path within this file. So to do that, we can change the file to a SCSS file rather than a CSS file. And we can use the Rails helper method for font URL or font path to drop that into our style sheet. So just checking for the icons on Font Awesome, we can see that the comment icon will look like this, and the heart icon should look like this one. And we can see indeed that this does work. However, the icons are very small right now, so maybe we can make those 2x to make them a little bit larger. And that's a little bit better, so we can also move those down into the post details section to make the background fit around them. And you will notice if we look at Instagram that the icons are the open type or the open variety, but these are paid icons, the premium icons, and for this tutorial we will just use the basic icon, which is the solid icon, but we can change these to a lighter color to make them a little bit softer. And we can even add some spacing between the icons to make them a little bit more usable. And we can even add a custom color to make them much lighter than they currently are. So just trying to make it more pleasing to the eye. And then we can remove this text muted class. So let's have a look at this. And yeah, it's starting to look quite good right now. We can even go ahead and add a hover effect when the user hovers the image, and an active class so that once it is clicked that it has a certain color. And we can go ahead and test this active class. So this is what it would look like if the post has been liked by our account. So let's remove that again. So once the user hovers over the heart icon, we would like to show them the pointer arrow so that it's obvious that they can click on these icons. So just makes it a little bit more intuitive as to what the user has to do. And then we'll add the hover class, just the same as the active. So now we will create a new JavaScript file for our posts. And in here then we can put the functionality for when the user clicks on the like button. So we're going to use just basic jQuery for this. Nothing too complicated in here. We're going to make an Ajax request. So once they click on the like button, then we will run this function. And in this function then we want to make the request to our controller using the new route that we had set up for liking the post. So we'll use the .ajax command, and then we are going to set the URL and the data that would be passed. So that data we're passing will be the post ID, and then we will have a function that runs afterwards once it is successful. So we are going to pass in the post ID as a variable here into the URL. So let's set the post ID, and we can do that using an attribute from the like button itself. So we will set that on page load using our view file. And we actually can remove the data method on the Ajax request since we are putting the ID into the URL. And then finally in the success method, then we will just run a console log to see what the result is. So we've made an issue here in the JS file, so let's quickly look at that. So it looks like we have accidentally deleted a few characters when we removed that data method that we were passing. So let's just correct this and try it once more. And we have another issue here. Okay, we have an extra closing tag, so hopefully this should fix it this time. Let's just get everything spaced out correctly. And now it looks like it's removed the error. So let's check the XHR request and see what's happening. So we haven't defined the post ID yet, so we need to do that in the view. So let's add an attribute for that. And let's try it again. And this time it looks to be going through correctly. So we can check the server log also to see if there is a like created, but there's nothing being returned in the console there. Yeah, and in the server log, then we can see that the like is being stored correctly. However, we should be rendering a template here. So let's go back to our controller and do that. So first we're going to create a partial for JavaScript within our posts folder in views. And in here we will just drop in a condition based on whether the like has been saved or not successfully. And then we will want to highlight the like icon and make it have a class of active, just to let the user know that the like has been saved correctly. So we will pass in the post ID from the controller and use it as a way to select our like, and then we will add a class of active. So in our view, then we will just add in our post ID. And it's just a quick way for us to select the appropriate post since we are on a feed of posts. So we can use the post ID from the parameter that's in the URL, and then we can tidy up this success and fail of the like being saved. So we'll replace this with a render. So we're going to render this JS file, and then we will use the post ID that we have set above. So that will automatically go into that rendered JavaScript file. And then we'll just have this success value set that we can access from the partial as well. So once we click on the like button again, we can see there's an issue with the missing template, and it looks like that is due to the JSON value we had set earlier. In this case, we're wanting to render a view, so we want to return that as JS instead. So trying this again, now we can see that it appears to be working this time. And yeah, it's showing the returned JavaScript that was run from this partial file. So we can actually put a clause here to make sure that this is a success before it adds this active class. So you will notice here that we are mixing Ruby with JavaScript, and that is because we have the extension saved as .js.erb. Now this is something you can do in Rails, and it just makes it easier for passing in values from your controller into your views. So finally, we want to sanitize the data a little bit here. So we will do a validates uniqueness of and set that to our account ID and post ID. So we want to make sure that the same user can't like the same post multiple times. So we don't want to be storing multiple entries for the same user. And if we have a look in the Rails console, you can see that there are multiple likes already stored for the same post. So that's something we can just go and destroy right now. And now that we have added this validation on the model, that shouldn't happen again. After a user has already liked the post, we also want to have the ability to unlike it. So once they do that, then it will delete the like that they have saved, and it will reset the class on the like button. So we wanted to remove the active class. So we can do that now from within the controller. So what we'll need to do is check to see if the like already exists for this user and this post. And using a .any will give us a true or false value. So we can use that as a clause to say that if this post exists, do this, then otherwise create a new post. So if it already exists, we want to destroy the existing post. Otherwise, we want to create the post, so we'll run the .save. And then within the JavaScript partial, we will run a remove class if the post has been deleted. So if it returns false, then we'll remove the active class. And if it's been created, then we will add the active class. So it'll be switching on and off. And then on default page load, we can check to see if it's already set. So what we will do here is create a helper file for posts. And in there, we can add a new method to check to see if a post has been liked by the user already. And we will just return a true or false value. So we want to do the same thing we were doing in the controller, checking to see if both values match. One thing to bear in mind here is that this helper method will be called each time on the loop that we are going through for the posts on the feed. This can cause what is known as an n+1 query. Now, in terms of performance for a real world application, you want to try and avoid doing this. However, in this case, we are just putting together something lightweight as an MVP just to show our product working. But this is something to bear in mind for production environment. Longer term, we want to try and remove these kind of scenarios where we're loading a query within a loop. So it's going to be loading that same query over and over again for every different post. But for now, I just want to raise the awareness about it. But that's something we'll go back and replace in time. So jumping back into our likes controller, now we want to catch the scenario where a like already exists for a post and that user is clicking on the like button again. So in this case, we are destroying that like for that existing post, and it's telling us that there is a wrong number of arguments within our likes controller. So if we go to the line, and it's for line 13, so existing like.destroy. Now what's happening here is that we are selecting multiple likes potentially. So this is an array that's being returned. So we need to say that it's the first item in the array that we're trying to destroy. And that appears now to be working correctly. So now we can go ahead and test this a little bit more, just liking and unliking posts. So when we like it, the creation of a like is made, and then once we unlike it, then it's destroying that like. So we now want to increment the likes count on that post view. So once we like it, we want it to go up to 1 like, and when we unlike it, then we want it to come back down again to 0 likes. And so we're going to create a method in the model for this. So after we create the like, then we want to update the counter on the post itself. So we'll do that both ways, whether the like is created and when it is destroyed also. So the first thing to do is find that post using the post ID of the like, and then we will update the counter value. So we can use a method called increment for this. So increment and we can grab the value then from the schema file, so just to double check on that. So we currently don't have a value stored for that, so we may need to go ahead and make a migration there for that. So let's open up our migration file, and we will add a integer value for this to track the like count on each post. And while we're here, we can also do the same for the comments count, as we will be adding comments after this. So now we can run our migration, and we can go back into our like model file, and then we can add this field that we have created. We're updating this total likes count. So before we go ahead and run this code, I just want to test it within the Rails console first. So just before we put it to the test on our browser. So we'll run the code here and increment the total likes, and you can see that it is now sitting at 1. So then I can check that our last post has got that value, and it seems we need to save it first. So after incrementing, you need to run a .save. We can now update that value in our view, total likes count, and try this out. So by default it's set to 1 now because we updated that within the console. Let's just add our before destroy method now to handle the unliking of a post. So before we delete the actual like, we will update the post count. So let's duplicate this and make this a decrement amount, and .save again. So we'll handle both of these methods now, and let's try this out. And we're getting an error here now about the prepared statement cache expired, so cannot change result type. And I think that's because we are handling this on a before destroy method. So let's try changing this to after destroy. And now it appears to be working, so really we shouldn't be interfering with the post before the destroy of the like. So anyway, this seems to be working fine. So let's now go ahead and update our view to reflect the removing of a like. So now we want to set the text within that likes field to display how many likes there are to the user. So the first thing we need to do here is set an identifier. So we will use an ID for this so that we can select it within JavaScript and update the value. So we'll use the ID as the unique identifier. So post ID likes. And we can do the same then for our comments. So let's update the selector. And hash to select the ID. So now we will just pass in the updated value to the post likes. So before we try this out, we need to set the value for our post likes instance variable. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we will get that value from the post itself. So once a user clicks the like or to unlike button, we want to set this value. So we can get that from post.find and the new post likes count column from our database. So let's try this out. So in our view, we forgot to handle the liking of the post for setting that likes count. So we'll move it outside of this conditional, and the one statement should work for both. And now we can see that it's working correctly. So currently we are just liking our own posts, but it would be nice to see if other users can like our posts too. So the next thing I'm going to do is set up some additional counts. Now I've just set up some dummy details here, and I'm going to paste them into the Rails console. But we can actually add that to our seeds file. And it's nice to update our seeds file as it easily lets us tear down and rebuild our database later. But that's beyond the scope of this video. And what we want to do now really is jump in here and add these users within this suggestions box so that we can set it up so that we can follow users and unfollow them later. And before we do that, I just want to remind you to take a moment, and if you like this content, do subscribe to the channel and like this video, as it really helps me out. And also leave a comment to tell me what videos you would like me to create. So if you would like me to create a video on building the next Fiverr, for example, or a Pinterest or something like that, let me know in the comments, and I will keep it in mind for some of the upcoming videos on the channel. So getting back to the task at hand, we are now building a partial for our follower suggestions. So we're rendering this partial. So now we just need to go and set it up within our accounts folder within views. So we're creating a new file for that, and this file will show the user details in a list format. So we will iterate over this instance variable that we were created called follower suggestions, and it will look a little bit like this as we see on Instagram. Now on Instagram they have this new to Instagram text underneath, so we will try to do that using the created at date for the account. So the first thing we need to do is set up this div, and this will be wrapped around all of the users that we are showing. And I'm going to copy this image tag with the link we've used previously just to save a little bit of time, but we will need to modify the user details a little bit just to match our loop that we have right now. So we're using the term user right now, but we can change that to account to make it a little bit more consistent. So we have this image and username, so now we will add the username. And again, we can copy this quickly, tweak it a little bit. So account.username, and we'll also need to add a link to follow, and then there will be some text underneath to say that if the user is new to Instagram or not. So like we were saying before, we can use the created at date to compare this. So we can say that if that user is less than 3 days old, 1 day old, for example, that they are a new user. So for this, I'm using a ternary operator. It's just a quick way of doing an if-else block, but within one line. So just to keep the code kind of clean, because this is a simple if-else statement, really. So if the account is less than 1 day old, we will show this text. Otherwise, we will show followed by, and we can put in X users here or something like that temporarily. So now let's populate this follower suggestions array. So if we go back to our controller now, so our accounts controller, and we'll set the value for this using the account. And we can use where.not selector so that we don't return our own ID or for our own account. So this should return basically all the accounts that aren't our own. So it's telling us here that something's missing, profile path. Okay, so we're assuming here that these accounts have a image already, a profile image, but we know that we have just set these accounts up by pasting it into the Rails console. So there are currently no image for these accounts, so we will need to check for that before we make that assumption. So we'll use a method, a helper method here to handle this, just to clean it up a little bit, and we will pass in the account. So let's create this profile picture helper method, and in here we're going to check and see if the actual image exists before we try to display it. And otherwise then we can show a placeholder image, so we can just grab a dummy image from the internet to do that. But first let's have a check to see if this image exists. So let's get ourselves a placeholder image, and we can use that then for those accounts that don't have an image yet. So this one looks quite interesting, it's a little bit different. So let's go ahead and save this image to our folder, and we can update the image name then within our helper file to match what we've just downloaded. And to make this a little bit more flexible, I'm going to set a default width here, and this can be passed in when we call this helper method to override this value. So now going back to our browser, we can see these images have been added for each of the users. We just want to tidy it up a little bit, make these more like thumbnails, just to follow the layout a little bit better. It's closer to Instagram. So we need to make a minor correction on the conditional for the created at date. So change that to a greater than sign. So basically the timestamp must be ahead of the 2 days ago mark. So that's why we're changing that. So now I'm going to try and improve the layout a little bit here. So we want to get the image, the name, and the details on the left side so that we can have a follow link on the right side. So I'll move this into a row with a 2-column layout based on Bootstrap. And you can play around with the column sizing here just to get the layout the way you want it. So we'll change this to 2 and 10, which is starting to look pretty good right now. And you can optimize this further to be different sizing on larger screens and smaller screens. So in this case, we just want to make sure that it looks reasonable on the small screen too. So you can resize the browser to mimic that. So now we are just going to add a class here to lighten the text a little bit underneath the image and remove that line break. So we'll add a text muted class, and it's starting to look more like what we're going for right now. So something around here with the image in our profile. So we can use this profile helper that we created previously and add that to our profile. So again, this user doesn't have an image for their profile picture yet, so we want to use a placeholder. So that's working now too, so that's good. And we'll also want to remove this edit profile button. So we built this really quickly for the edit profile, so we want to add a conditional to this to ensure that only the logged in user of that profile can click that edit button. Now, even if in the case that we do click this edit button, we shouldn't be allowed to edit the profile anyway. So right now, by default, it's showing our own profile, which is kind of the expected behavior, but just that button shouldn't be displaying there. So what that means is we need to have a check for that. In this case, we'll see that the account that is signed in, which is us right now, has to match the ID of the profile that we're looking at. So just to reiterate, having that button there is not a danger. We can't edit that user's account, but it's just to make it look how we intend it. We obviously don't want to see that button if it's not our profile. So let's add this conditional to this edit profile link. So we have to be able to do that check first. And now I just want to make a quick tidy up of the layout of these 3 values. So the full name should be underneath these values. So we can use a row and some columns to space this out accordingly. So previously we were using CSS just to mimic that structure, but we'll clean this up a little bit. And we just want to add some spacing to the bottom, so we're going to add a margin and set a max width on this profile stats section. So then we will add the profile stats class to the div that wraps these values. And that's looking pretty good right now. So that's gonna be enough for us on that profile. So let's go ahead and introduce a follow button on the suggested profiles section. We want to use a form to make this follow submission. So we're going to use a post request for that, and we will base that form tag on a new route that we have yet to set up. So we will call that follow account path for now, and then method we will set to post. And we need to set a hidden value in here, which will be the ID of the user that we're going to follow, or the account. And then finally we will add a submit tag which will have the follow text on it. And we will add some basic classes to this follow button, and we will float it then to the right. So let's set up our new route for this form, and we will set this as a post this time. Again, the reason we want to set this as a post is just to ensure that users don't start entering the URL into the URL field on the browser, or so that bots also don't accidentally crawl this route. So it just makes more sense to be a post method here for this. So now we will add the method to our controller to handle this follow account functionality. And in here then we want to accept the parameter that we are passing. So the account ID will be passed as the form parameter. Before we can take this any further, we need to set up a new migration. So we need to create a new migration so that we can record the relationship between users. So what user or what account follows another account, and if they follow them back, etc. So we will create a table to do that. So within our migration file, we want to create this references to our account table. However, this is going to be a bit of an issue because we can't do this twice using the same command. So we need to say that one is the follower and one is following. So we can do this in a slightly different way. We can first pass in the column name, and we'll set that to follower. And in this case, we'll use the references parameter just to say that this is the table that we're using for this. So the reference is the account table. And then on the following, we can also do the same thing. So this should allow both columns to be treated as a foreign key that link back to the accounts table. So lastly, we just want to add the timestamp to keep a track of when we followed a particular user. So that could be useful later for notifications or something like that. So if we run our database migration now, that appears to have worked correctly. So now we can go back to the controller and finish off our follow account functionality. So we want to create a new entry into this database field. So we can do follower.create, and we set the follower to our current account. So that's the logged in user right now. And then following will be the account ID or follower ID parameter that we've set. So before this can work, we need to create a new model for the follower table. So let's set up this follower.rb, and we'll set this up just in the usual way. So we need to add a validation here for uniqueness, and we want to basically ensure that only one record gets added for each connection. So I don't want to have multiple records of me following the same user, so we can use the scope of the following ID to ensure that that is unique each time. And then we can add the relationship here to say that this follower entry belongs to the accounts table. So we can try this now again in the browser. And we're seeing an issue with this hidden field. So I think we've missed the tag at the end of the name for this hidden field tag. So we'll try this again, and it is now working. Now one thing we can do is make these buttons a little bit smaller. And now we can inspect this form to see if everything looks okay. So one thing to notice here is we're missing the value for the follow ID. So that needs to be the ID of that account that we want to follow. So let's add that right now. And now that has been set, so let's give this a try. And now we are seeing an issue with this follower.create method. So if we go back to our schema, we can just double check the column name, and it has an ID at the end. So I think we're missing that in this code that we have for follow account. So we'll reload this once again and check the logs, and for some reason it's rolling back this change, so it's saying there's no template found, and it's running this follower exists query first. So let's go back and make this into a conditional. So we will add an if in front of our follower.create method, and if this follower is created successfully, then we'll redirect the user back to the dashboard or the feed view. So while I tidy up this message that is the success message, I just want to remind you guys that if you enjoy this content, do subscribe to the channel, as I will be creating more videos like this on how to build MVPs in Ruby on Rails. And I'm also planning to do some content on React Native in the future, and several more JavaScript-based frameworks. So subscribe to the channel and drop a message in the comments to let me know what kind of videos you would like me to create. And yeah, it will be great to see what you guys are looking forward to. So hopefully you find this useful, and yeah, let's get back to this MVP build. So right now we are just returning a different message here if the follow account fails. So that could be in the case where the follower already exists, if we're already connected to them. And in that case, we just want to return a user back to the dashboard either way. Added an exclamation mark onto the follower.create method, and that forces it to give us the reason why it's not creating in this case. So it's telling us that the account must exist. So I think we have made maybe a typo in here, but we can comment this out for now, the relationship for the follower to the accounts. And by doing that, it seems to have worked in this case. So it's created a new entry into the followers table. And now I want to remove those users that we are currently following from this suggested followers list. So we can do that quickly by grabbing IDs of those followers. So the first thing we'll do is get the IDs. So we can do follow.where, and then .IDs will return an array of IDs for those users. And then we can move that following IDs into the where.not query afterwards. But we should also append our own ID into this followers ID array that we have. Now we can do that quite quickly by using this two less than symbols. So that just pushes the item onto the end of the array. So let's try this once again, follower.where, and okay, so I realize we've made a minor mistake here. We need to actually map the account ID in this case. So we are currently, .IDs method is currently returning the IDs of the follower entries in the database. We want to be using the following ID, and we have a typo again, just remove the S. Okay, so this is now working. As we can see, that user has been removed from the list, and once we click it, then they also get removed from the list. So that's working quite well now, but we need to update these counts within our profile. And you also notice there that the photo is a bit blurry, so we'll try to fix that too. So if we go back to our helper file for accounts, we can just change this to use the full-size photograph. Now that's a bit of a quick workaround. We could duplicate this code and have one for the thumbnail and one for the full-size picture, but I think it's good enough for now. And now we want to set the values of total followers number that's being returned on the profile. So we can see here in our schema file that we don't have a value for this right now. We're not recording a count for that, so what we can do is go into our total followers, and we can run a select for this. So follower.where, and using our own ID, we can find the accounts that we're following right now. So we'll return a count for that. And simply by doing the same thing and changing that to following ID, we can get the total followers also. So right now 2 followers, that looks correct. So now we just need to test it the other way to make sure that it works. And we can do that by signing out and signing in as one of the different users that we created. So we can just get the details here from the seeds file that we created earlier. And I want to try testing. We can see here that we have 1 follower already from this user. And you can see my main account that I've been testing, and I've just followed it back. And these numbers look correct now. But we can just go and like a few things just to see if that works too. So that's going to do it for this video. We have now got the ability to like posts, follow users, and have them follow us back. And we are tracking the number of likes on each post. So if you've enjoyed this content today, do consider giving this video a like and subscribe to the channel. There will be one more installment of this Instagram series, so keep an eye out for that. And there's just one other thing I want to point out to you is that I will be adding this MVP and multiple other MVPs to my store. Now, I realize that I've given away a lot of code here for free, but that's totally fine. It's part of the learning process, and if you actually want to buy a more fleshed out version of this MVP, you can do so at the link in the description below. Now, thank you again for watching this video. Do leave some comments below if you want to see additional MVP videos in the future, and I will see you guys in the next video.